JamesAllen.com is the online destination to easily design a customized engagement ring and save up to 50% compared to traditional stores. You pick a diamond, whether it's lab-created or earth-created, James Allen has over 200,000 conflict-free stones. Then you pick your ring setting and metal. And if you need some help, they have real-time diamond consultations available, where an expert can walk you through it all. Get 25% off your order at JamesAllen.com code podcast. That's JamesAllen.com code podcast.
I'm Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com.
And I'm Scott Chasen.
This is a replay of WIBW show, The Drive.
Here's this week's episode on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network.
Good evening, Wildcat and Jayhawk fans, and welcome to The Drive, sponsored by Briggs Auto Group. I am Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com, and the man across the studio for me is Scott Chasen. Scott, I just got back from Lubbock. They'd need to move that closer. For my convenience, just move a little, like into western Kansas would be fun.
Yeah, I think moving Lubbock closer, moving Morgantown closer, and I just looked at the Big 12 schedule, and I guess K-State's playing at UCF in 3 years.
I don't know about that, but I do know this. You can interact with us on social media at Facebook.com/The Drive Show, on Twitter at The Drive 13, and of course, answer our weekly poll question and make your game predictions on our Twitter page. And remember, if you ever miss an episode of The Drive, you can listen to an audio-only version that will appear each Monday morning in the form of a podcast at GoPowerCat.com, as long as I remember to put it up, which I didn't do until Monday afternoon. I apologize. We will start things off with our 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill sponsored by Vanderbilt's Your Work Boot Center.
Well, K-State, just like Fitz, showed up a little late. K-State overcame a 14-0 deficit in the game's first 4 minutes to escape with a 25-24 victory at Texas Tech. Fitz, how important was this win for the Wildcats?
It was huge. They just had to get out of there with a win. And you'd want them to play well, and you get the win, and everything looks peachy keen. They did not play well. They really struggled throughout this game. They gave up. They got twice as better on defense on first possessions. Last week against Iowa State, it took one play for Iowa State to score. This week, it took Texas Tech 2 plays to score. So they are improving in that. And then they fumbled the next kickoff, and it was 14-0 before they even had stepped their offense onto the field. Skylar Thompson had touched the ball, and it's 14-0. And then the Cats started to try to get back into the game, try to get themselves regrouped on defense to have some better things happen, and start finding what would work against the Texas Tech defense that had been really struggling against the run, and apparently did solve that. They were much better against the run, but they also opened up the pass for K-State. And once K-State's defense got going in the second half, Scott, it was really impressive. Felix Anyudike with just a huge safety in this game that completely flipped the momentum of the game, and from then on out, K-State took control, scored 2 touchdowns in the second half, went for 2 on the second one and didn't get it, but they did get the 25 points that were just barely enough to win the game. Whether it's 1 or 50, at the end of the year it goes down as a W, and it doesn't really matter at that point. But with all that said, K-State had 12 penalties and 2 turnovers and looked pretty ragged at times throughout the game, and at other times they looked pretty good. This level of inconsistency won't carry this K-State team very far. And in fact, there's only probably 2 teams in the conference in which they could log this type of effort and get a win. And one of them's Texas Tech. And I'm not going to mention the other one because I think most of us can guess, except Saturday didn't look that way. That got confusing. Anyway, K-State's got to play at a higher level. They got TCU coming in on Saturday, go to Kansas, West Virginia coming in after that. All very attainable wins for K-State. But they have to clean up their mistakes. The Wildcats were just didn't pay enough attention to details in this game. It was really troubling.
Yeah. Now, Fitz, I agree with you on that point, but I will say, and I'll reiterate what you said, I think this is a massive win for Kansas State just to get the win somehow. Texas Tech, we'll see how good they are. I mean, they obviously played lights out against Kansas, and they started this game great, too. I think they had a 14-point halftime lead. But just getting a win here, moving closer to bowl eligibility, especially, you don't want to say it, but you have the Kansas game kind of in the bag a little bit later, so that's your 5th win. You just got to go out and get one more. I think this is a big win for them.
Yeah, Texas Tech, they had 24 points at halftime, so K-State pitched a shutout in the second half. What's interesting is, I don't know the order of the games, but their 4 remaining games are Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Baylor. So trouble in Texas. Big trouble. Scott, speaking of trouble, Kansas gave it to Oklahoma. They led the Sooners into the fourth quarter on Saturday. I can't explain this.
Yeah.
How did the Jayhawks stay competitive with one of the best teams in the nation?
Well, Fitz, first let's address the kind of, I don't know if it's an elephant in the room, it's something, but Oklahoma did not show up for this game in the first half. Oklahoma did not show up for this game in the third quarter, and eventually the Sooners got going. But you know what? If you're Kansas, take advantage of that. And I thought Kansas and Lance Leipold came in with a brilliant game plan. One, to give some new guys a chance. Spencer Rowe logged time. Devin Neal got a lot of carries. And what did Kansas do? The Jayhawks slowed this game. They ground this game to a halt. I don't know if you were able to catch this. Fitz, they broke the clock in the stadium. That's what they were doing on the first drive, running the clock down to just a second or two. And then at one point, the referees stopped the game and say, the scoreboard is off, the clock isn't there, and they had to keep time by hand, which probably honestly made it harder for Kansas to take all those seconds off the clock. But Kansas's strategy was to frustrate Oklahoma and to make Oklahoma, you better make your possessions count because you're not going to get many of them, especially with Kansas moving the chains and continuing to move the ball down the field. I thought there was a huge moment in this game in the second half. I thought for Kansas, probably the most promising moment of anything that happened, and it was when Oklahoma scored coming out of the half. And then if you were watching the game, you heard Robert Griffin III on the call say, Kansas needs an answer. It can be 3. It doesn't have to be 7. But if you're Kansas, you have to score. And what's happened when Kansas has been in those situations this year? You think about games like Coastal Carolina, 6 points in the third quarter. I think the Baylor game was close at halftime, like 14-7, something like that. The Duke game was close at halftime. I think Kansas might have had a lead in that one, but they've wilted. They've fallen apart. They haven't counterpunched. Well, Kansas marched down the field and scored. I thought that was a huge moment. I thought that was a huge sign of growth. This is a flawed Kansas team, and again, let's be frank, this is a Kansas team that was only in this position because Oklahoma did not show up to play in this game, but take nothing away from Kansas. They had a great game plan. They executed it perfectly. Jason Bean looked fantastic. The receivers made plays for him for the most part. There were a couple times where they didn't help him out, and the defense stood up and got stops. That was a complete performance by Kansas. It's a shame they didn't win.
Yep, you're only responsible for your own play. If the other team plays great or horrible, there's only so much you can do about it. And if Oklahoma wants to take the day off, I'm glad Kansas pushed them. It was fun.
We can all use a day off sometimes. Yeah. Well, Fitz, there was hope for Gary Patterson and TCU coming into the year, but the Horned Frogs have fallen to 3-4 after a loss at home to West Virginia. I looked this up. Last 4 years, TCU is 21-21, 500 football. Do you think Gary Patterson's under any pressure when it comes to his job security?
Maybe. I'd hate to see it. Maybe he is, but the reality is I never understood the optimism about TCU this year. They came in, 4th or 5th in the preseason poll, and I just couldn't help but think being in Texas helps TCU in those preseason polls. Go with me on this. Remember that the vast majority of Texas media that takes this poll are covering the University of Texas, but they also are familiar with these Texas teams. Now, all that'll change when Texas moves out of the conference. We'll see fewer Texas voters, and this optimism about programs like the Frogs will drop. I didn't think TCU was going to be great. I didn't think they'd have this many struggles. They looked awful against West Virginia. We saw most of that game in our hotel room, and it just wasn't a pretty effort. And I think Gary Patterson certainly might have some issues because guess what, Scott? His expertise is defense, and their defense kind of stinks right now.
Yeah, well, Fitz, I think the game at Texas was one for me, or against Texas, where I was really impressed with TCU. Now, at the time, I also probably thought Texas was better than Texas was going to turn out to be. But, I wrote a few notes. I took them with the old-fashioned pen and paper here.
Wow.
TCU has not ended the year ranked since 2017, has not been ranked higher than 25 since the start of 2018. So, that's 3 years now where TCU, which used to win 10, 11 games fairly regularly, was at one point competing for a college football playoff berth, hasn't done anything really of note. They've been between 5 and 7 wins the last few years. They look to be headed for that again. And you're right, I was probably one of those early season believers. There was a lot of this, Gary Patterson usually talks a certain way when he has a team that he knows is going to be really good. Well, we haven't seen that team materialize. We didn't see it when they went 6-4 last year. They went 5-7 the year before that, 7-6 the year before that. Those are good seasons. If you're at a place like Kansas, those would be great seasons. But Gary Patterson's kind of competing against his own standard, and right now he's kind of falling short of that.
I would probably caution TCU about making a move there, but we'll see what they do. Now, a quick look at your poll question results. The poll questions are brought to you by Midland Exteriors. Love the home you live in. Call today for a free estimate.
Well, last week's question was, K-State's next 3 games are at Texas Tech versus TCU and at Kansas. Predict the Wildcats' record. We look at the results. The most common answer, 47%, about half of people said 2-1. 1-2 got 17% of the vote, so 17% of people think they are now going to lose to Kansas. 31% of people, I'm going out of order here, said 3-0. 5% of people, already wrong, they said 0-3.
That got confusing. Why'd you go out of order? I have a brain that demands order. I want order. Here's this week's question. Who had the more impressive outing this week? Kansas led OU in the fourth quarter, or K-State won despite a 14-point halftime deficit. I can't speak. Vote on our Twitter page at @TheDrive13.
Well, that will do it for this half of the 2-minute drill because Fitz is out of gas, just like Kansas in the fourth quarter. But we will be right back with more on KU and K-State on The Drive.
So I'm a father of one. I gotta find a babysitter. I found care.com and I was blown away. Through the platform, I was able to find local and experienced candidates along with their reviews and rates, which were way more affordable than I anticipated. Care.com really put me at ease knowing that they were all required to go through a background check. If you're like me and you need to find someone reliable for your childcare necessities, check out care.com. Find the ideal sitters for your childcare needs.
Welcome back to The Drive as we continue our weekly 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill is sponsored by Vanderbilt's Your Work Boot Center.
Well, basketball season is near and K-State is coming off 2 seasons of struggles. Fitz, is there hope for Bruce Weber's Wildcats this year?
Well, there's hope. The problem here for Kansas State is I think the Wildcats are better. And just from getting more experience, we saw how they improved through the course of the year once they settled into playing the right kind of defense, got a little more confidence on the offensive end. I mean, that freshman trio of Nigel Pack, Davion Bradford, and Selton Miguel are so critical for this program. But they also have Mike McGurl, who's come back for a super senior season, and 3 transfers into the program that I really think are going to help in their own ways. Now, these are guys that, may not impress the national experts. Mark Smith coming in from Missouri/Illinois seems to really fit what K-State needs in terms of leadership and kind of a guy who's been around the block a little bit and had some success at different schools. Marcus Noel, a point guard, gives him someone to move Nigel Pack over to the 2 and let him be a shooting guard more. And Ismail Mossad, one of the stretch 4s in the Dean Wade mold. I think this guy's really going to help K-State. He plays the kind of basketball that Bruce Weber wants his team to play, and to have that outside threat to stretch out a defense is really important. Yes, I think K-State will be good, but Scott, as you know darn well, this whole conference is going to be better. This conference is going to be really competitive, even more so than usual. So K-State could be a lot better. And, maybe just being more competitive in games would help, but winning a bunch more games might be difficult. And winning enough games, getting to the NCAA tournament, which a lot of fans think is, kind of the threshold this program needs to get back to, that's an awful lot to ask. They're going to have to do a lot of damage in that non-conference schedule, including playing in the Kansas City tournament. We'll look at Arkansas and maybe Illinois or Cincinnati. We'll see. I think this team will be more entertaining. It'll be better to watch. It'll be a better product. But as far as Big 12 wins, actual W's, I'm not sure they'll get a whole lot more than the 4 or 5 that they've gotten in the last few years. Maybe they'll end up, in the 6-7 range, but that's probably not enough to get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, Fitz, I don't think you're wrong. I think both can be true. K-State can improve a lot, and the Big 12, I'm not necessarily sure at the top it's going to be better just because Baylor was obviously so good last year. But how many teams are there now that you just feel like wow, Texas is good. Kansas is good. Texas Tech could be interesting. Oklahoma State added Bryce Thompson.
Oklahoma.
You just go down the list. It's like everyone got a whole lot better. So I think it should make for some great basketball.
This conference is going to be crazy. And Big 12 Basketball Media Day was this past week in Kansas City. And Scott, the Jayhawks have been picked to finish first in the conference again. How do you expect this team to be?
Well, I think Bill Self, one of the things he spoke about a lot at Big 12 Media Day was the depth, because Kansas does have Mitch Lightfoot back as a super senior, and I guess Chris Tehan, if you want to add in a walk-on. So they've got 14 scholarship guys that, Bill Self mentioned, I believe it was on the Late Night in the Fog, the broadcast that goes with the scrimmage. He does some sarcastic play-by-play would be how I would describe it. He mentioned you could redshirt like 3 different guys and still have 11. He's talked about playing a 10-man rotation. Bill Self traditionally has not played a 10-man rotation. That number has been closer to 7 or 8, and when you get into the big games, it's a lot closer to that 7 number when it's, okay, it's time to play the number 1, the number 2 team in the country, or it's an NCAA tournament game. You look at Kansas's lineup potential. If you start a guy like Remy Martin, you start Ochai Agbaji, Jalen Wilson, David McCormick, Christian Brown. Okay, that's a pretty good 5-man group with a bunch of returners. You add a couple transfers, Joe Yesufu, Jalen Coleman-Lands, DeJuan Harris has been one of the most improved guys of the offseason. That's 8. Okay, that doesn't include the top 2 ranked freshmen in this class. That does not include another transfer in Cam Martin, who is a super senior transfer up to this level. That doesn't include Bobby Pettiford, who I think they believe has a lot of potential as a guard prospect. You just list so many names, and here's the thing. You never know how they're all going to work out, because yes, on paper, Kansas might have 2 starting 5s that both sound great, but you never know which guys are going to do the things that maybe they get on Bill Self's nerves a little bit. I use that not off the court, but on the court. One example I always give was Sam Cunliffe. I think Sam Cunliffe, who transferred to Kansas from Arizona State, could have helped Kansas in the brief time that he was here. But I think in one of his early appearances, he fouled a jump shooter, and that was like all you saw of him, for the longest time, just because he didn't have Bill Self's trust. That will happen when you have 10 newcomers on the roster. There will be freshmen like Zach Clements or KJ Adams, or someone will do something, and Bill Self's like, nope, I'm not playing that guy. I've got 11 others that are ready to go. But that's what he's got to figure out. This will be one of the more challenging years of his career, blending experienced transfers with young freshmen with 4 returning starters. Fitz, it's a very interesting puzzle. All of that is to say, I think Kansas will be very good when Bill Self figures that out. I think it'll take time.
Oh, darn. Kansas has too many good players from which to pick a starting lineup. What will they do?
Well, hey, you know what they say? You would rather have a few great players than a lot of good ones. And I think it was 2018-19 Kansas that learned that. Got a 4 seed in the tournament, got bounced in the second round to Auburn. So sometimes good is not necessarily the best friend of great.
Very true. Now we step out of bounds, and Out of Bounds is brought to you by Copeland Insurance Agency, part of your community for more than 20 years.
Well, Fitz, let's step way out of bounds and all the way to baseball. It'll be Houston and Atlanta facing off in the World Series. Do you have any thoughts on that matchup?
No, I don't. I really don't. I'm totally disconnected from this. I mean, I watched the end of the games when I could. I'm not one to sit through an entire baseball game unless my team, the Royals, is involved, and it's been a few years now since they've gotten in the playoffs. This is a pretty interesting matchup. It's an intriguing matchup, and I know it's not the one TV wanted. They had, the LA and Boston markets on tap, and that didn't work out. I think this is going to be a really entertaining series with 2 fan bases that really love baseball. So I'm happy for baseball. I just want my Royals to have a competitive chance. But what I do find interesting is this. The Braves pulled what the Royals are doing now. They totally tore down, started drafting, and rebuilding, and now we're seeing the benefits of that, and maybe that can be the Royals in 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah, well, it would be obviously very exciting for that fan base if they could finally, just get over the hump, win that World Series. And how about Houston? I feel like Houston has lost some of the luster of being the villains. I guess that was a weird way to arrive there. It's not as strong anymore just because all that has happened in the sports world since, those big stories and are they cheating? Is it legitimate? I guess, they were cheating, just more how legitimate is what they've done. I'm really interested to see for Houston to get back here. I don't know if they'll be perceived as like the villains of the sports world as this goes, but what an interesting series. I think it'll be fun.
Now let's hear from the fans. Our fan question is sponsored by Meadowlark over there in Manhattan, supporting people in living their best lives. Well, our fan question this week is this, Scott. Do you think Kansas wins another game this year? Nick and Topeka cutting right to the chase.
Well, look, I think Kansas has a chance. We fielded this question, if not before this year, other years. Like you get late in the year and it's, you think Kansas can win another game? Look, I think Kansas probably can. The OU game showed you that. But you can't stress enough. They showed a great montage of this during the game, but I'm not sure OU took this game the most seriously. I think Kansas did take advantage of that. I think Kansas is improving. West Virginia and K-State are the two most winnable games, but I'm probably not expecting another win the rest of the year.
Okay.
So remember to ask us your questions on our Facebook page and on Twitter at The Drive 13. When we return, we look at our predictions here on The Drive.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage, to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's here to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 15% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast.
Welcome back as we head down the home stretch of this week's show. Now it's time to take a look at our predictions. Remember to make your weekly predictions on our Twitter page at The Drive 13. Here are last week's results. The viewers went 2-1. I went 2-1. Scott,
it's a struggle.
We 1-2. We have exchanged our seats on the struggle bus. Last year I was in the front row. This year he's in the front row. That's how it works. Here this
I'm driving
pick.
it. I'm driving the struggle bus.
Driving the
Just
struggle
to be
bus.
clear, Fitz, I have taken the wheel.
We start with this game. Kansas is a 30.5-point underdog at Oklahoma State. Will the Cowboys beat the Jayhawks by 31 or more? Scott.
Yeah, we'll get this updated when we post it on Twitter. I actually like Oklahoma State here. I think Kansas won't play as well as Kansas did last week. I think Oklahoma State is due for a bounce back after the Iowa State loss.
Kansas sold me. I think they're going to cover.
Well, next is TCU. Kansas State. TCU is as a 3.5-point underdog, actually. Fitz, what do you think?
I think K-State got themselves back on track. It's hard to judge games from week to week, but TCU looked awful, just awful. Looked like they kind of at the end of the rope. I'm going to pick the Cats to cover.
I actually thought TCU would be a slight favorite in this one. That's why I said they were giving up 3.5. They're not. They're actually getting 3.5. I will take TCU. I guess I'm a little nervous about it, but I think TCU probably bounces back.
And this game is fascinating to me. Baylor is playing host to Texas. You would think maybe Texas would be the favorite. Nope. Baylor by 2.5. Texas plus 2.5. Who do you got, Scott?
I'll take Texas. I think I've probably picked Texas every week, and that's probably why you're beating me in the standings.
That might have a lot to do with it. I'll take the Bears. I really don't have a feel for this game yet, but I will take the Bears. Again, make your picks on our Twitter page at The Drive 13. Now it's time for our On the Clock segment. On the Clock is sponsored by Carpet One. Buy local for a strong local community. And we start with Mr. Scott Chasen.
Well, Fitz, I, like a lot of people, watched the Chiefs game, and after it, I was kind of a little upset. Feels like the Chiefs are wasting Patrick Mahomes when he's going to be playing the best football. It feels like he's pressing now. The offense can't get it figured out. The defense, the coaching is a problem. I had a conversation with my dad today that kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit, and I want to share some wisdom from Jeff Chasen. I'll give him a shout out by name. Yes, it's not good for the Chiefs to waste a year. They could go 9-8, 10-7. They could miss the playoffs this year. It's certainly conceivable. I think what is more important is what happens this offseason. It's hard to keep the same players, keep the same motivation year after year after year. Chiefs probably were overdue for a retooling of the roster, and they definitely need to do that this offseason.
Well, Kansas State came out of the gates on Saturday and played awful. as bad a football as I've seen in a while from a K-State team, and yet they found a way to win. And even though they won, some fans are still demanding Chris Kleiman's firing. And I have news for everyone who keeps saying we need a new coach. It's not happening. You're just wasting your breath. He's only in his third year at Kansas State, and he will be around for at least another year, if not more, and I expect him to get it going. We will see. That's it for this week's edition of The Drive. We'll see you next week right here and all week on social media.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.